Thanks, Ange. Well, we've all heard the terms at work: blue sky thinking, circle back, touch base, reach out. But what if jargon like that was used at home as well? Well, here's how parents might handle the birds and the bees chat.
Well, sweetie, when Mummy and Daddy synergise with each other very, very much, Mummy grants Daddy an open-door policy in order to further enhance the possibility of cross-cultural pollination.
Mummy and Daddy remove from their structures any moratoriums which would otherwise prevent an inadvertent merger, and they diarise summits as often as commercially possible. Within 9 calendar months, you can expect a yield of at least 1 baby.
I thought you just had 6.
Clear as mud.
That's it, yeah. Our next guest wants to ban jargon at least once a week. Keynote speaker and author Gabrielle Dolan came up with Jargon-Free Fridays, and she joins us now. It's a pleasure to speak to you today. So let's run this up the flagpole. Why do we use jargon?
Yes, let's run it up the flagpole and see who salutes. One of the reasons we use jargon is that sometimes people use jargon to sound more important than what we are. Sometimes we use jargon to avoid telling the truth. Our politicians have that down to a fine art. But the vast majority of users, because we actually don't know we're using it and everyone else around us is using it. So we just sort of fit into saying things like running it up the flagpole and strategising and visualising and operationalising, all those things.
You've come up with a bit of a list of some of the most overused or useless jargon. That includes pivot, ducks in a row, synergy, let's take this offline, and executional excellence. One's a bit weird. We've heard a lot of pivot lately.
Yeah, pivot would have to be one of the most overused words of 2020. And, you know, I guess pivot in itself is not a jargon term. It's just the overuse of it, where we felt people were pivoting so much to the point we're all getting dizzy. But, yeah, things like executional excellence is a classic example of people using jargon. And
what does
to
it
me,
mean?
when
What does executional excellence mean?
It's a good question. I first came across this about 20 years ago, and this manager was using it all the time, and I asked him, what does he mean by that? And he sort of used more jargon to explain it. And I asked him a second time, and he got really frustrated, and he said, what it means simply is when we decide to do something, let's just make sure we do it right. And I said to him, why don't you say that? Because executional excellence sounds like you just killed someone, but you've done it really well.
One of my favourites that I don't like is See You on the Other Side. They use it on some telly shows, and I think, what, are they going to die in the commercial break? Because it's a funny old saying. And there's another one saying, get your ducks in a row. Does that help us?
No, look, ducks in a row is an old one, but we're still using it. And sometimes people go, well, it might help to visualise something. But and you've probably heard it in meetings where someone will go, we need to get all our ducks in a row. And everyone agrees with that. But then walk out of the meeting and sort of say, what ducks? What row? It actually doesn't provide any real, direction or action on what we need to do, but everyone agrees with it.
Can jargon ever be beneficial? Like, I suppose in some work cultures, you start speaking your own language. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
It actually is a good thing, and it can be beneficial. So I know a lot of companies that create their own jargon and everyone knows about it. So if jargon in itself, like acronyms in itself, isn't such a bad thing if everyone understands what it means. But the point is, every industry has their own jargon and acronym, every company has their own jargon and acronym. And the problem is when you start communicating with people outside of your company or outside of your industry that don't understand it. Or in fact, you have new employees come into your company and everyone's talking about this jargon, but they don't understand what it is. So it actually starts to disconnect and isolate people, which is where the real problem is.
Say what you mean and say it clearly. Gabrielle's latest book for business is Magnetic Stories. Try and ditch the jargon this Friday, people.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Gabrielle.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's stop putting all our eggs in the same basket.
I know.
Yeah.